going to be a little different than our typical panel, with the hope of both our moderators and panelists sharing and discussing various questions. So this is going to be a little bit more casual than a regular panel. I've encouraged Dr. Vockley and Dr. Gillingham, as they're asking questions of the panelists, to also include their own stories in there, right? Because they're a part of our family, right? And so without further ado, we are going to be introducing the panelists. And so as I'm introducing you, please feel free to come and walk up to the stage. First, we have our FAOD metabolic clinicians, Dr. Vockley, who enjoys going to the theater and concerts, playing Irish music in bars, and wrestling with his dogs. We have Dr. Gillingham, who enjoys going to the symphony, the ballet, and cooking new recipes and reading mysteries. Next, we have Annika Nielsen, who is an avid consumer of podcasts and audiobooks with a passion for purple and always looks for the silver lining. Annika has LCHAD. We have Haley Cobble, who is a public librarian who enjoys video games, reading, knitting, and a good cup of tea. She grew up in Oklahoma, but now lives in Vermont with her partner and their 2 cats, and she has MCAD. Now, Annika is here, and she might not know of the schedule change. So if somebody, no, not Annika, Haley, if somebody knows where Haley is and they can go grab her, because I don't see her, but I know she's here, that would be amazing. Next is Tasia Richeski, is a Tasia Richeski enjoys traveling. She's a book and nature lover who is trying to learn pickleball and get better at yoga. Tasia has VLCAD. Next, we have Alex Salser. Alex Salser is a 20-year-old college student with LCHAD studying human development and family sciences. She spends a lot of time being creative, hanging out with friends, and spends a lot of time on FaceTime these days. Andrew Kerrigan is 20-year-old college student with LCHAD studying health informatics. He spends time hanging out with his friends, playing basketball, and also seems to be spending a lot of time on FaceTime these days. So without further ado, go for it.
Yeah, I wish they.
Okay, we'll see.
All right, so I think the way to start is that this is. Are you ready to? Oh no, I should have a page here somewhere. Oh, there it is. You stole it, Alex. So the whole point of this. First of all, I'm told not to call you young adults. You're adults. We know this. And I know this because my children are now adults. I guess from a starting standpoint, I would love to hear from each of you, if you want to talk. We often, as care providers, think of you as patients, as first children and now adults with a disease, a fatty acid oxidation disorder. How do you think of yourself? Come on, Alex. I'm going to pick on you.
Okay. What do I think about myself?
How do you think about yourself when you're sitting there and the lights are off and am I allowed to say this? You're sipping your adult beverage. How do you see yourself?
Yeah, I'm just like everybody else, I have dreams and goals in life, and LCHAD is a part of my life. And, I didn't necessarily get to choose that, but I can choose what I do with it, and I can choose the attitude that I have. And so even though, I think I'm Alex, I'm a college student, going for my dreams, and I'm a hard worker. So just trying to overcome the challenges to continue working towards those dreams. I'm not gonna let anything get me down. And I think about who I am and my attitude, and I'm just trying to live joyfully. And even though I do have a rare disease, I just want to be joyfully rare and just living one day at a time.
Andrew.
So with LCHAD, I would say like I don't let it define me, even though I know I have it. So I try and live every day like as somewhat normal as possible, even though I have like different things I need to do throughout the day. But I would say for the most part, I just take every day one day at a time and do the best I can.
Tasia, I never knew you as anything but an adult. I met you as an adult.
I'm staunchly in the adult category. Like, I don't think I qualify as a young adult anymore, but yeah, just to reiterate what you guys said, I think it's important, you know, when you have an FAOD or really any rare chronic, like, don't be defined by your illness. Like, don't get so caught up and so consumed by all the things that maybe you can't do or that the limitations that you have. And I try to focus on the things that I feel like having an FAOD has taught me or allowed me to become better at or do better. So being like perceptive of other people and being able to like understand like complex information and just to be like resilient to really anything that comes up, and just knowing that whatever life kind of throws at you, you're going to be able to handle it because you've kind of already handled quite a bit. So yeah.
I mean, I would piggyback off all of that and say for me, it took me some time figuring out how to exist without being defined by LCHAD and figuring out my identity outside of that. And I think the older I've gotten, the more I have strived to try to be a good daughter, a good sister, a good friend, you know, a good partner. And I think that we can take everything that we learn in the context of LCHAD and being a part of this community and apply those to how we relate to other people in our life, you know, in and out of LCHAD. And I would say those are the things that I focus on when I think of who am I and how do I want to exist in this world. It's so much more expansive than just the LCHAD.
Haley, our question is, we know how we see you as patients. How do you see yourself?
Oh my goodness.
This was not on the the list, by the way. I just made that one up.
I don't know. I feel like I haven't really had any issues with MCAT as an adult, and so I feel like it doesn't define very much of my life. Of course, I can't fast, and I feel like I tend to get hangrier than normal people. And like I can tell when I'm crashing a little bit, like I'll get real dizzy and I can feel my blood sugar going down. But I found that if I ever have that issue out someplace, like, or if we're waiting in a restaurant for food or something, I can usually ask for a soda or something that with sugar in it and get something very quickly. And while people don't understand MCAD, they do understand the word hypoglycemia. So I can be like, my blood sugar's low, and they go, oh, okay. And yeah, my friends and family are very accommodating, and if I ever have,
So all your friends know you have a disease.
pretty much,
Okay.
yeah, it comes up every once in a while, or like at work when I'm like, oh, I'm taking 2 days off to go to a medical conference, you know. Yeah. And you know, I tell them what it is, and they're like, oh, okay, I don't understand that, and I'm like, I can't fast, and they're like, oh, all right.
Melanie, you got the next question.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing. All of you have walked this journey for a while. through childhood and into adulthood. So what would you tell your younger self that you wish you knew back then that you now know?
We don't have to have everybody answer every question because it will take a long time and we'll only get 3 questions in. So if you want to pass on a question, that's fine. But if something tickles your fancy, dive in. And if not, we'll call on 1 or 2 of you.
Andrew, you're gonna take that one.
So I would say, like I had a hard time distincting like that I'm gonna be different from everyone else whenever it came from maybe like I'd say like especially the physical part of things, right? Because as a kid, you want to run around, you want to play, you want to do all those things. But like as I progressed in life, I realized I can do those things, but in moderation. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that I struggled with was how do I balance that? How do I be somewhat like normal, you know? And so I think that was one of the bigger things. And then the other one was like I was in a wheelchair for a while. So like don't care what people think about you, like just do you. Like everything else is like obsolete. Like just make sure you're bettering yourself. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I would, you know, when I was younger, I definitely tried to like felt like I needed to hide that I had anything wrong or that I, you know, needed things, right? And I guess I would tell my younger self that like start communicating it with people. Like everyone in life has things that they're dealing with. And like when you kind of get it out there and get it out in the open, it opens up opportunities for other people to maybe come forward and be like, oh, hey, like I actually deal with this or deal with something similar. And it's just not feeling the need to hide. And even I would say like when I was younger, like the need to overcompensate for like the burden I thought I was causing people. But really it's not necessary because we all, again, have things that we struggle with in life. And we're here to help each other get through it rather than feel like we're a burden for what we don't have. So I think that would be my advice.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And as far as, you know, things that I wish I'd known, I wish I'd known that a lot of the stuff that I had gone through, like the muscle loss, the neuropathy, the sort of not super great foundation with medicine and food, all of those things, that it wasn't abnormal, that I wasn't alone. And, you know, if I'd been able to have a crystal ball and look into the future and see that I would find a community, because I didn't find this community till I was like 16 or 17. And so, you know, all of that time I had kind of an unorthodox experience with juggling all of that and, you know, interpersonal family relationships and all of the things that come with that inherently, that I felt super isolated for a long time. And if I would have been able to tell myself, like, you'll find a community, you'll figure out that a lot of the things we're going through aren't necessarily your fault. And that, you know, you're gonna get through what you think are the hardest days of your lives and you'll be stronger for it. And it's all gonna be okay, even if maybe in the moment it's not.
Of the all, it's all gonna be okay part of that. Okay, so my kids will tell you, never give me a microphone because you never know what I'm gonna do with it. And don't bother giving me a script because I'll go off of it immediately. And so I'm gonna take this opportunity to go off script and ask all of you. There's some parents of young kids out there right now. You're dealing with things that you feel are maybe they're easy for you, maybe they're difficult, maybe they're overwhelming. But you see our panel of now aging adults up here. Their hair is going to be turning gray and they're going to, you know, all that stuff.
Our backs already hurt.
Their backs already hurt. What would what would help you in taking care of your child right now to ask this tremendous resource that you have in front of you? All right, hang on. I'm going back here to Sharika. I haven't delivered a baby in a long time.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so my main question is, at what age and what was helpful that your parents did to motivate you to take more personal responsibility for your disorder and the things that you had to do, like keeping up with your formula, eating when you need to? Kanan's 7 and he's still little, but there's a piece of like in school, it's like, oh, well, they didn't remind me to drink my milk. Well, buddy, like, you got to drink it. So like thinking back to that phase, what was helpful that your parents did? What was maybe not, but maybe don't say what wasn't helpful, but what was helpful in encouraging that kind of personal accountability?
I transitioned to middle school from elementary school in 5th grade. And so when I was about 11 is when I really got okay, in the elementary school, the school nurse really helped me facilitate everything that I needed. But in middle school, it wasn't just one teacher anymore. There were a lot more. I had my own schedule. I was all over the building, and my nurse could be my point person, but ultimately I was responsible. And so working with the staff and everything to where I would have my meds with me, my snacks with me, so everything was on me so I could facilitate myself. I think giving the tools to your child to be able to start facilitating it for themselves. I think as you transition to having more independence, having a backup plan, where an adult maybe is still checking in on them on the occasion, but isn't like doing it all the time, to kind of like be in a transition from going from, help all the time to like no help remembering. And so I think that would be good, like have some transition plan in place so that if they do forget or something, there's a little bit of a backup, which can help train them and so they can learn like maybe to listen to their body and things like that as they come of age, kind of between years.
Yeah. I distinctly remember from a very young age, my parents made me sit in on every like long awkward conversation, whether it was like with the school about like my like accommodations or my health plan, whether it was a doctor's appointment. And they really kind of like, at that point when I didn't want to, forced me to be the one to lead the conversation or not, right? Like if I didn't have any questions, or like they would just let that happen. And over time, I learned that I needed to be an active participant in that to be able to get anything out of it. And I think another thing they did, like, again, from a really young age, even simple things like I remember being like, I don't even know, like 8, 10, and like I would be packing my lunch, right? And they'd be showing me, okay, like, or not even showing me, they kind of let me pick out the things that I would bring to school and like help me understand what I could and couldn't eat. But honestly, thinking back, like, I feel like the biggest thing they did for me, which I'm sure as a parent of a child with a medical condition can be very scary, is they let me make mistakes, right? They let me make my own mistakes and learn from it, which again, like mistakes when you have a medically complex child can be really scary, right? Because these are mistakes that could cause further health problems, but they always let me learn from my own mistakes. And I feel like that put me in a position as I got older to really thrive and be able to manage at a pretty early age.
Yeah, I would say that I had a little bit of the opposite experience in terms of being able to make mistakes. And so I think looking back, if I had had a little bit more of a better relationship with that and having it framed also in the way of, you have to do this, or, this is a consequence that's going to happen. This is something that you get to do so that you can participate in the ways that you want to, instead of the other approach can sometimes cause resentment, even to medicine and food, which is already hard enough for us, you know. So I think approaching it with compassion and, like you said, just kind of trusting that if you build that good foundation with them, that even through the fumbles that they're gonna figure it out. I mean, they're gonna have to do that either way throughout life, and the sooner that you're able to foster that and also foster, you know, a good relationship with themselves. I think that that's one of the things that I've had to learn is that's the most important relationship that you have. And so if you can develop that relationship with yourself, no matter what other, you know, parental or other relationship isn't maybe showing up the way you need or any of those things, that it can help them navigate it better if they know that at least they can trust themselves in that.
So what are some things you wish your parents wouldn't have done?
That's a hard one to answer.
Anybody who has a parent here can take a pass if they want to.
I can say something practically without throwing my mom under the bus. You know, she wanted to make sure I took my meds and everything. And I would get so annoyed, you know, she would ask me if I took it, you know, I'm like 17. And we created a system so that things would be out on the counter. And then as I facilitated my own daily routines, she could just look at the counter to know if I had taken my meds. She wouldn't have to bother me about it. And so that was a nonverbal signal that she could get the answer to her mom question because she's just checking it on me. But it would annoy me.
Anybody else?
I feel weird saying like things my parent, because like they did a very, very good job, and a lot of the things they did really well. As I just said, like they were able to let me make mistakes when even it was probably terrifying for them. But I feel like sometimes my parents are very much like they would sometimes say, they would be like, we know you have it hard, but there's like other people, like there's other kids or like other things out there that are like harder, right? Like you can do this. Like there's other people who are going through more than you're going through. And like I saw their intention in doing that, right? That like they were trying to give me perspective of like it could be worse. But sometimes, especially as a teenager, it would just make me feel bad, right? Like it didn't make me feel better about my situation. It just then made me feel kind of guilty that like I had feelings of like anger or like resentment toward having a medical condition, right? So I feel like maybe finding a way to reframe that and like giving your child perspective, but without maybe that like really strong approach of like, well, it could be worse. It's like, I know it could be worse, right? Like I know that, but so I would say that's just like the one thing that I would change. I would have changed.
I can say that well, two things. One thing I wish my mom hadn't done quite so early was you know, telling me that I wouldn't be able to have children. I think that is something that could have been an easier conversation as I'd gotten older, and maybe would have given me more agency with that. The other thing is, you know, it's so easy for our parents to want to their identity is also kind of defined by us and by our LCHAD and MCAT. And so I know that with my mom, I had a really hard time kind of figuring out our relationship just as mother and daughter outside of the context of LCHAD. And so focusing on building that relationship just on its own, I think would have been helpful for me, and at least for her and I's relationship.
And just to step outside the session for a second, I need to qualify this for a second and say, we now know of many young women with all of the fatty acid oxidation disorders who have successfully had pregnancy. So if you're sitting there going with that comment, it's a personal decision, as is everything else with your life. And for individuals who decide to have a pregnancy, we're there as care providers to help you with that. So there's no contraindication to getting pregnant.
Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't mean to give anybody a heart attack. by saying that.
Oh, I could see some anxious faces out there.
Yeah, well, I can't see so well, so. Great, thank you very much.
That's right. Those visual cues sometimes are important. Get a question back there? Yep, go ahead.
So my question is, how did your parents help you feel comfortable about going to the hospital when you got sick or needed to go in for any reason?
We just knew going to the hospital was gonna be part of my life. And, my mom, she would, make it fun, as fun as possible, right? It's no fun. I can't be with my friends. I can't do what I want to do. I can't be at school. But especially my growing up years, our hospital rooms had themes, whatever holiday we were around or the season. I mean, it snowed in my hospital room and has had fireworks, all just out of creative things we've made. And so I think it's just part of finding that silver lining in those times that, yeah, this is no fun. But I have memories from being in the hospital around those holidays and, spending Christmas right after Christmas in the hospital, all the things and but there were still actually positive memories that came out of that because of the way that my mom changed the environment to have a little bit of happy. And even now, being 20, it's just the days we don't want to have a good attitude. We can put washi tape on the walls or play with stickers or whatever around the room. And it just helps us to change our attitude.
Anybody else? Tricks for making a trip to the hospital more tolerable?
I just, I didn't have as frequent trips to the hospital. Mostly when I had them, it was because I also had a seizure disorder. And so that was the cause of most of my hospital visits. When I got a little older, like past the age of 2. And I do remember sitting with my mom and she brought like flashcards and was teaching me all the colors and numbers in Spanish and French and like just things to like kind of keep me thinking about anything other than the fact that I was in the hospital. And I think that really helped. I still remember that. I wish it was more fun. It was pretty impactful on me, not in the best way. But I do remember her doing that and that helping in terms of like giving me something to think about, something to learn and be excited about.
Question after? Yes, absolutely.
I'm Alex's mom. I'm not under the bus. She's great. But I think one of the things I was afraid of, actually, I knew Alex's personality very young, and I was afraid that we were going to have the one where she cheated on food and ended up in the hospital, the one where she overdid it and ended up in the hospital. And I was prepared as a parent that we were going to do unnecessary hospitals. Unfortunately for Alex, her body did not lend itself to that. She had many trips to the hospital, and I will never forget the night because, as all of us know, it's always in the middle of the night. She had a pretty tendency to get hypoglycemia. So she was maybe 6 or 7, vivid memory. She's got her bowl. I'm exiting at the hospital exit, and she said, "They really do make me better." She knew the torture her body was about to go through. We knew how hard she was as a stick. Nobody talked about it, but we knew we did what we could. But she already at a very young age had a very strong cause and effect of when she felt that way, The only solution was D10 at 1.5 maintenance. So I don't know how much that contributed to that. As Alex's acceptance, she felt bad. She might fuss and argue with us, but the moment we decided to go to the hospital, she never resisted. So I don't know how much that contributed to that. The other factor is our family created a lot of routines in the hospital. And we didn't learn until later when big sister had to do a round in the hospital. The dad and I knew how to say goodnight at the end of the day, but sisters did not know how to be in a different role. But we realized we had very firm family routines that were hospital days that involved family and friends, that involved friends who came regularly to play games or watch the movies. But she knew those were going to be part of those experiences. But she also knew that the only way she was going to not feel that way was when that D10 went. So I know that contributed to her personal acceptance of that experience.
Thank you, Lynn. A question for any of you who would like to answer this. You know, two of the biggest items or pieces of transitioning from, you know, sort of early adolescence to adulthood is you get your first job and you start thinking about what you're going to do after you graduate from high school. How did you all handle that?
I originally planned to go to college. I ended up dropping out of high school early and doing the college route sooner than I originally would have. But I tried out the teen job thing. You know, I worked at Subway, which was the perfect job for me because I could have a fat-free sandwich on every shift, or low-fat sandwich on every shift. You know, but ultimately I found myself in the hospital a lot after working, and I wasn't, the idea of disability benefits weren't foreign to me. And so when I turned 18, I applied. I was originally denied, but I went through the appeal process, and from approval or application to approval, it was about 1.5 year process. And I can say that it has its challenges. You really have to, even more so than when you're in the hospital, you do have to advocate for yourself and jump through a lot of, you know, hoops. But I am in the hospital much less. And I know that may not be everyone's path that they want to go down. But I think for me, it was the best avenue. And I do have goals to go back to school and work with the DVR center, you know, my local DVR center, and get support. But for me, that was the best decision at the time.
I think when it came to choosing college and, you know, career one day, I just, you know, knew myself and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to help people. And then from there, I kind of looked at my limitations that I might have, and I was like, what's doable? What's doable for school? Because you got to go through school before, you know, that career path, depending on what it is. And so I think there's a little bit of adjustment when it comes to understanding the limitations that are involved. But I think you can definitely still get to your goals for sure. Working within those limitations that you might have because of your FOD. So that's kind of what I sort of considered and made plans around as I went off to college.
Tasia, how has your VLCAT affected your job?
Yeah, so I think, you know,
Why don't you tell them what you do?
Yeah, so I work in research and development. So I work on the business side, so I work in like the contracts department. But so, you know, a typical, like, I guess what you would call not 9 to 5, even though it's definitely not 9 to 5 this job. But when I went to college, you know, I would say the first, like, really the first year, but even into the second year, like, was me testing boundaries and like figuring out, okay, like, what can I do? What can I not do? And it was during that time that it became pretty clear that like structure and routine and an ability to kind of like manage some of these things was really going to be what what led me to success and to staying healthy. So at that point, like, you know, I kind of figured out, well, like a highly physical job may not be an option for me because you know, my first freshman year, you know, I think I was hospitalized most times. Probably I was in my life just because I was testing those boundaries and I was doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing and that were extremely physical. And I think through that experience, I kind of, you know, again, through experience, learned that, okay, those things and doing that for a long time may not be an option. So I need to kind of shift, you know, I need to take my interests and take my academic interests and turn them into something that I can get a job and have a career that's a little bit more structured, that I can create a structure around. And then it was a matter of like finding, and it's like the whole dance that you do is like, you know, when you're interviewing for jobs, like, do I tell them like I have it? And it's like, no, you don't have, like, for anybody who's wondering, you do not have, like, when you're going through that process, you do not have to tell anybody anything about your medical history. But, you know, once you are part of an organization and you work for them, if you do need accommodations, if you do need things set aside for you, that's an option. But it was then finding a workplace that was supportive of that. And I was very lucky that I kind of like fell into one where, you know, they don't need to know all of the information, but they're very supportive of me and the work that I do. So they're the type of people, they're not micromanagers, but they're like, if you get your work done, like, that's all we care, right? And so I've proven myself in other ways that I'm capable and I'm able to do the work. But, you know, unlike maybe another employee, like all of a sudden I'll have like a week or a week and a half that I am like out, like spontaneously, because I have some event that happens, right? And like, that's maybe not something they have to deal with other employees. But, and I think it's just having that open communication to the point that it's acceptable and like comfortable to you, like finding that fine line between enough information and not too much information, when you're in like a workplace setting.
I can absolutely agree with that. I mean, even in the short time that I was working, you know, those team jobs, I had multiple conversations with my managers, and, you know, I'd ask like, hey, can I use a stool on this shift or whatever? And luckily I didn't run into any issues with that. But more often than not, the open dialogue that I created with the managers that I had, it was, yeah, you may not be able to show up for every single thing, but the ethic that you have when you are here at work is better than half of the able-bodied people that are here. And so we are willing to accommodate you in whatever you need. And so having that open dialogue and just being as honest as possible really made a difference. Well, honest as possible and finding that balance, right? I mean, yeah, but yeah, it's possible.
I was gonna say, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself too. And, you know, you don't have to tell people everything, but like for me in college, I did pretty okay most of the time. The one thing, I was in marching band, and on Saturdays we'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get done at 10 o'clock at night. And there would be this huge, like 7-hour gap in the middle of the day where there's no snacks, no nothing. And I just straight up told my band director, I was like, I'm going to put some animal crackers in my uniform and I'm going to bust them out and eat them when we're in the stands, because it's going to be much less awkward than what might happen if I don't. And at my work too, like I'm a librarian, so I don't have a very physical job, but I've regularly been the savior of my workplace, because I'm always the person that has a bag of goldfish or snacks or something. And so like sometimes, you know, my coworkers will be like, oh my gosh, I'm starving. And I'm like, want some goldfish? Want some pretzels? I've got some, because I just always keep that stuff on me and just make sure that I have it just in case, you know.
Thank you guys so much. Along those same lines, one of the questions that I'd like to ask is, as you were going through the education process, what kind of accommodations, and plans that you had in place or things that you did in college have been really helpful for you?
So I would say, like before I even went to college, I talked to like the dean of students and stuff, and I made sure that I had everything correct going in, like that I could take tests like a day after if I'm not feeling good. I can reschedule them. I'm not going to get penalized because in college, if you miss a test, it's a 0, and that can make or break grades. I mean, it does a lot. So for me, that was probably the biggest one. I'll have it where I can leave class maybe a few minutes early so that I can get to my next class and I'm not like stressed out. But like away from that, I would say when you're getting your classes to schedule things around when you take medicine, or if you do have class, bring medicine with you. But like for me, I never had class like during 12 o'clock because I knew that was like my lunchtime. So like be very like in tune with your body, I would say for sure.
Yeah, I just piggyback on that. And when I went to visit schools, I met with their disabilities office, and my disabilities advisor, is kind of my backup person. I'm more the advocate in the forefront with my professors and everything, and they just are my backup team. And some of the accommodations I do have are not just living, make sure I have a fridge and microwave and a setup that works for me, as well as I can have extra time on my tests, different testing location, just with less environmental factors. You can have more energy to focus on the test, and I can take breaks during a class and not get penalized. I can pull like a 15-minute emergency card basically, and go get food, have a GI emergency, whatever it is. That's all like part of my accommodations. And so those are just some of my practical.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this yesterday at one of the round tables, how like Alex took the smart approach of like, preparing for all of that. I would say for me, I did not take advantage of any of the accommodation, like going into undergrad, because I was still kind of in that phase of where I was like, no, I don't need to do that. Like I'll just figure it out when I get there. I highly recommend not taking that approach. Now looking back, because when I did run into issues, then I was trying to like do it while I was in college, while I'm doing my work, like it'll all just hit me at the same time, right? Whereas if I would have had some of that pre-planned ahead of time and had those like protocols in place, my life would have been so much easier. So I highly recommend parents or kids looking at college, like that's what those resources are there for. And I even remember when I finally had to go and kind of talk to somebody, like they were just very open and they were very knowledgeable about it. And I was just like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like this would have made my life so much easier. But I think like pacing, as Andrew mentioned, is really important. Like I learned how to like stagger my classes and make sure I didn't have them like back to back. So I was like running from like one side of campus to the other. And I learned like little tips and tricks like that I just think helps day to day. And I think one thing I learned really early that has kind of like stuck with me throughout was like not to procrastinate. Like I've never had the luxury of being able to procrastinate. I had friends and, colleagues, whoever, who can like wait till the last minute to like write their paper, right? And they can get it done. Whereas like I was always like, well, what if I'm sick that last night and I can't write the paper, right? So I've always learned to like not procrastinate and kind of do the work as I go along, to make it so that I can get to the same endpoint that everybody else is getting to, but in a more paced manner.
Yeah, I would second that. I didn't really have many MCAD related issues in college, but I taught freshman comp for a while. I was a TA, and I had a lot of students who had various accommodations that they needed, whether it was for anxiety or, having medical stuff come up halfway through the year. And one thing that I would very much recommend is just and I'm not sure what qualifies exactly as disability, but if you can talk to those people early on and just let them know, the hope is that it'll never be a problem and you'll never have to deal with it and worry about it. But that way you have that in place so that, you know, if something does come up, it's a lot easier to cover things, because, you know, your professor can be like, oh, well, yeah, of course you can have a week extension on this paper. You've been in the hospital. And I would say the same thing when it comes to jobs. There are, when you get a job application, most of them do have a disability accommodation sheet. And like I don't know if MCAD would qualify for that, but I have clinical depression also, which does count as a disability. And so you know, hopefully nothing is ever going to happen, but just in case I am unable to get out of bed for 3 days, you know, I always fill it out just in case, just so that if I need that accommodation, it's something that I can get. And I would recommend that just from a peace of mind perspective.
What did your best friend growing up know about your disease? And how did that affect your friendship? Would you do anything differently in retrospect and in looking at that relationship?
I would say, so one of my best friends, also name is Alex, but at home he's great. But I told him like right out the gate what I had, and like it was easy then at that point too, because I was in a wheelchair when I didn't feel bad and I was constantly in the hospital. So he kind of picked up on like, well, he hasn't been here in a while. So it was pretty obvious, but it was really like it really benefited me, because if we were going out to like play sports or something, he would understand that like I'm not going to be able to do exactly what he's doing, stuff like that. I have to take breaks. And like overall, like if we go out to eat dinner or something like that, like he'll know like, okay, like we got to pick a place where there's like grilled chicken or something, you know, something that's not like super high in fat. So I would say even when it comes down to like simple things, it definitely makes a difference. And I mean, we're still friends, so I think it's working out pretty good. So.
Definitely when we were younger, you know, our parents were more the coordinators of, oh, is there an Alex friendly snack at your house if Alex comes over to Olivia's house or Hannah's house, you know, and to the extent that 7-year-olds, you know, can understand a complex medical condition. I would try and explain to my friends. I would have my formula and my bag. Sometimes we'd all trade bags and they pretend to be Alex holding the little formula bag, you know. And you know, they just knew like Alex has to have it, Alex has to have it. And through sports and stuff, my friends, as we got older, would see it on my face that I would need something, and they'd be like, here, Alex, here's the Gatorade, and they plop me on the gym floor and they'd play volleyball practice around me, you know, because they were like, no, this is what Alex needs to do right now, you know. So ultimately I kind of had this community that and friends that truly came around me to support me. And I mean, we're still friends. I mean, we survived even living as roommates. And so you know, me and my childhood friends we're still great friends today. And you know, I wish that they didn't have to see some of the stuff that I do go through. And I think I can't take that away from them. And but they are still along for the ride with me and still supporting me, and I'm very grateful for that.
So I'm gonna go off script here for a second, because I happen to know that Hannah's best friend, or Alex's best friend, Hannah, is actually sitting here. So I'm gonna ask you the same question. What did you know about Alex as she was growing up, and how did that affect how you interacted with her?
I mean, it's kind of like Alex was saying. I think from a young age, we kind of knew that there was something, but maybe not understood all the implications. Like we didn't have the scientific background to understand what fatty acid oxidation even is. You know, and so there was that aspect of like, there's something a little bit different. Like she has to have this formula, she has to have this medication. Like when we would have sleepovers, like, oh yeah, we'd have to wake up in the middle of the night so that she could take her medication. Like it was just kind of a fact of our friendship. And as we got older and some of these other physical disabilities started manifesting, and it became less and less invisible, like other people notice it more. And so, but because I've always been friends with her, it's just kind of, that's always been how it is. And we've always just had that solid friendship, I think, outside of the medical aspect of it. And then, of course, as I grew up and went through school, I'm a biochemistry major in college right now. So I'm beginning to understand more deeply the actual disease and some of these issues. And so I have more of a different role, I think, in that way. But first and foremost, we're still friends. We're still close. We were roommates our freshman year in college, and obviously we're still best friends. So I think we did something right there. But yeah.
Even friend visits in the hospital were meaningful. So
Anybody else up there with a best friend as a kid?
Oh, no, I was just gonna make a joke. There's a kid I grew up with. We were more like siblings because his mom was like my daycare teacher. So like we joke that he's like, "You're the reason I could never go to McDonald's when we were little." And I was like, I probably did you a favor there. Like now that we're older, I'm like, you're probably gonna live like an extra like 2 or 3 years with me. So but yeah, I think it's like when you're younger, people, again, they don't, like exactly what you said, like they don't have the background, but they know their stuff. Like even kids are perceptive and they pick up on things, and they know that you have something that's a little different about you, right? And I think going back to like the snacks, like I was always the kid with the snacks, which I mean, that was a good thing. People were always like, well, Tasia will have the snacks, and or like you know, friends will, they have like inklings of what's going on. Oh, have you, like I have some friends who will be like, have you eaten recently? Like, are you sure you've, you know, eaten or taking your medicine? I'm like, I'm 31 years old. Like, I think I got this. But you know, it just goes to show that like, yeah, even kids are perceptive about that thing. And that's when you know you found a good one, is when they ask you, even though if it seems annoying, it's not. It's nice to be, that somebody cares enough to like ask those questions. And you can just hope that like, if they ever had anything that you could be there to support them with, that you would be asking the same questions. So yeah.
Melanie.
Are we okay? So we talked about friends that are really close. Do any of you have tips on how you tell or don't tell someone who's a stranger that you might be meeting for the first time about having a fatty acid oxidation disorder?
I think the simplest way I've found is describing it like diabetes, but with fat that my body can't break down instead of sugar, because it's the easiest thing that other people can understand, and you don't have to go into the whole history of everything and your personal history and the story. So, you know, comparing it to something that's a little more widely known in the general population has been helpful. Kind of like how you were saying, like hypoglycemia, I'm like, it's hypoglycemia on steroids, so it's like real serious. So that's been helpful for me, and it's been like a good I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but that's helped.
Yeah, I concur. I use the same, but like I feel like, you know, diabetes, hypoglycemia. Obviously, if a person starts asking more questions and you develop in your relationship, you're gonna like go into more detail, but it's just something people are generally aware of, and they can like make that connection in their mind that, okay, I understand generally how diabetes works. So I think and they just know the limitations that you may have are going to be similar. So I think that's what I would do as well.
I think I've learned I don't necessarily have the option anymore for people not, you know, to see my LCHAT. And so I just kind of, if someone is asking, I'm just like, yeah, I can't use fat for energy. And something I've learned is if it is a stranger and they're being nosy, maybe asking you too many questions, you truly can choose not to disclose things. And that's something I've had to navigate with having limitations that people can see now. And so just kind of learning, like, you know, you have your trusted people, and you can choose what to tell people, because I think that is your right. That That's all you and your decision.
I think that was a hard one for me to learn. I'm still learning that, like in my late 20s, that I actually have a choice to not disclose anything if I don't want to. I always felt like I had to be the ambassador or the voice for, you know, whatever it was. And so I didn't have that privacy. That's a good reminder for me. Thank you, Alex.
All right, we're at the end here, and I'm going to ask each of you to say one thing to these parents out here who are desperately wanting to see their kids grow up to be you. And how can they help their kids make that transition? Alex, go ahead, start.
I think all of our journeys are going to look different, and hopefully we can be a beacon of hope for you and your kids. But your journey may look different than ours, and that's okay. Just navigate one day at a time and celebrate every day. Celebrate every victory you have, and try not to think too far ahead. You know, let them have their dreams and goals, but you can choose today. You know, and what you can do with that. And so definitely celebrate everything that you can.
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that up, but I will say that was really good. But yeah, but I would say just keep supporting them. Like they're gonna have ups and downs. As long as you keep supporting them and everything that they do, like it's gonna mean the most to them. Like, and it's something you can keep doing as they get older. It's the same formula, you know, so you can keep doing that. And like, I know, like with me growing up, it was a little worrisome when I wanted to play basketball, but it was something I really wanted to do. And doctors didn't really like the idea, and neither did my parents. But you can do most things, but there's always going to be limits to what you can do. So finding that limit, it's better to do some of something that your child loves to do than not being able to do anything. So I would just keep that in mind.
I know MCAT is different than LCHAD, which I think is what affects a lot of the kids here. And in a lot of ways, I think I have it a lot easier. But I would say just, you know, helping your kids know themselves and really be in tune with themselves. I know at the MCAD summit back in October, somebody asked, like, should we share with our kids like what hypoglycemia feels like? Absolutely. Because they're going to know the instant that they start getting lightheaded and shaky, you know, like, oh, I need to go eat something. And I think like reinforcing to them to be in tune with themselves and what's going on with themselves is very, 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 very important. I'm also so happy for all of y'all here that there's been so much more research done on all of these fatty acid oxidation disorders since I was a kid, and that there's better access to medicine, better with the new clinical trials coming out for MCAD. That's super exciting, and I'm really, really glad. I think that things have come a long way, and I think it's going to make things a lot easier going forward.
Yes, they're all very, I'm like, I don't know how I can follow this up, but yeah, I think for me, there was a lot of trial and error, right? And the error was on my part. At times it was on my parents' part. Like, we're not perfect. Humans are not perfect. But I always, you know, especially when kids are younger with FAOD, there's so many decisions, right, that have to be made, and most of them are being made on the parents' part. And I can't imagine, honestly, how overwhelming that is as a parent, and you're trying to do things that make a path that's successful for your kids. But honestly, like looking back, I know that like the decisions I made or my parents made, would I have made them exactly the same? No, but they made them with like good intention and because they wanted me to succeed. And kind of like bringing your kids into those decisions, like as soon as you can, and as soon as that's something that's like comfortable, I think helps, because it shows them that a lot of living with an FAOD, and honestly just a lot of living with life, is like trying something and then maybe it doesn't work out exactly the way you planned, and you have to recalculate and you have to try again. And just, yeah, there's no expectation that you need to be perfect in anything that you're doing. You're doing everything you can do, and just keeping that in mind.
I mean, at the end of the line, I'm like, what can I say? I would reiterate all of that, just, foster that relationship of trust within themselves, of being able to have uncomfortable conversations, and on both sides, trying to not take things personally, because we are all doing our best, the parents and the kids. And, I think one of the things that comes to mind of the trusting our bodies is, and something that I think has kind of stumbled the whole community, is when the body doesn't match the labs, right? That's been one of my biggest hurdles in trusting myself, and even well into my 20s, of being like, oh, okay, well, do I go to the hospital, or is it all in my head, or stuff like that. It's really been a process of building that intuition within myself, even all this time later, and just giving yourself grace for all of it, for everybody involved. We're all trying our best. And we're here, and we have an amazing community. And I think giving ourselves permission to lean on the community and not feel scared to ask there's no silly or stupid question. They're all valid, and we're all here to help each other.
I just want to, I think this is working. No, that's yours working. Thank you guys so much for your vulnerability. Thank you so much for being willing to share about your journey and your stories. And thank you for being here. And thank you, Dr. Vockley and Melanie, for leading this time in this session. So we're going to take a quick 2-minute break. There's